Dr. Elena Vasquez was reviewing quarterly entertainment reports when the holographic alert materialized above her desk. The crimson warning symbol rotated slowly, casting red shadows across her cluttered office in the Galactic Entertainment Oversight Division. She had been expecting another routine violation report from some outer rim planet, perhaps illegal gambling on Rigel 7, or unauthorized gladiatorial contests on Tau Ceti. What she hadn't expected was an emergency summons from the High Council itself. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The message was brief and unsettling. All human recreational activities throughout the galaxy had been indefinitely suspended pending immediate review. Every game, every sport, every form of entertainment originating from Earth was to cease operations within 72 hours. Elena stared at the floating text, reading it 3 times before the implications began to sink in. In her 15 years working for the Council's Entertainment Bureau, she had never seen such a sweeping prohibition against a single species. Elena's fingers trembled as she accessed the emergency communication array. The device hummed to life, projecting a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy with millions of points of light representing every inhabited world. Nearly 40% of those lights were now flashing amber, indicating human entertainment facilities that would soon go dark. The scope was staggering. Humanity had spread their games and sports across thousands of worlds, becoming one of the most prolific sources of recreation in known space. The door to her office slid open with a soft hiss, and Director Marcus Chen stepped inside. His usually composed demeanor showed cracks of stress around his eyes. Marcus had served as the liaison between human entertainment companies and the Galactic Council for over 2 decades. If anyone understood the political implications of this ban, it would be him. "Elena, please tell me you found some kind of error in the system," Marcus said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "Tell me this isn't really happening." Elena shook her head slowly. "I've verified the authenticity codes 3 times. This order comes directly from the High Council chambers. Every signature is legitimate. Every security protocol has been followed. This is real, Marcus." Marcus ran his hands through his graying hair, a gesture Elena had seen him make countless times during budget meetings and regulatory disputes. This time, however, the motion seemed less like frustration and more like defeat. "Do we know what triggered this? There has to be something. The Council doesn't make decisions like this without cause." Elena pulled up another holographic display, this one showing recent incident reports from across the galaxy. There have been some unusual situations lately. 3 different worlds have reported what they're calling, quote, behavioral anomalies related to human games, but the details are classified above my clearance level. The first report had come from Nexus Prime, the Council's administrative capital. A group of Vorthan diplomats had been introduced to something called poker during a cultural exchange. Within 6 months, the entire Vorthan diplomatic corps had restructured their negotiation strategies around concepts of bluffing and calculated risk. The traditionally straightforward Vorthans had become unpredictable in their dealings, causing several trade agreements to collapse when their negotiating partners couldn't adapt to the new approach. The second incident occurred on Kalas, a peaceful agricultural world known for its strict adherence to harmony and cooperation. Human colonists had introduced a game called chess to the local population. Within a year, the Colossians had developed an obsession with strategic thinking that began to permeate every aspect of their society. Farming cooperatives split into competing factions, each trying to optimize their yields through increasingly complex schemes. The planetary food distribution system, which had operated smoothly for centuries, became a battlefield of competing strategies. The third and most troubling report came from the military stronghold of Titan Base. A human officer had taught a simple card game called Blackjack to her alien colleagues during off-duty hours. The concept of calculated risk and probability had spread through the ranks like wildfire. Soon, military commanders were making tactical decisions based on odds and percentages rather than established doctrine. 3 separate training exercises had ended in complete chaos as officers attempted to apply gaming strategies to real combat scenarios. Elena studied these reports with growing concern. On the surface, they seemed like isolated incidents of cultural misunderstanding. Dig deeper, however, and a pattern emerged. Human games weren't just entertainment. They were teaching tools that fundamentally altered how other species approached problems, relationships, and decision-making. "Marcus, I think I understand what's happening," Elena said, turning her display toward him. "Look at these psychological profiles. Every species that's been exposed to human games shows similar changes. Increased risk tolerance, enhanced strategic thinking, greater comfort with uncertainty and deception. The Council isn't banning our games because they're dangerous. They're banning them because they're effective." Marcus studied the data for several minutes before responding. "Effective at what?" "At making other species think like humans," Elena replied. "And apparently, that terrifies the Council." The communication array chimed again, indicating an incoming priority message. Elena accepted the transmission, and the stern face of Council Administrator Zephyr appeared in holographic form above her desk. Zephyr belonged to the ethereal caste, beings of pure energy who had evolved beyond physical form millions of years ago. They served as the Council's primary administrators, managing the bureaucratic machinery that kept thousands of civilizations functioning in relative harmony. "Dr. Vasquez." Zephyr's voice resonated with harmonic overtones that suggested vast intelligence and patience. "You have been selected to represent human interests in an emergency hearing regarding the entertainment prohibition. You will report to Council Chamber 7 within 6 standard hours." Elena felt her stomach drop. Emergency hearings were rare, and they typically resulted in permanent sanctions or expulsions from Council membership. "Administrator Zephyr, may I ask what specific charges are being brought against human entertainment?" "The formal charges are corruption of alien behavioral patterns, introduction of chaotic elements into stable societies, and systematic undermining of established social orders," Zephyr replied. "The informal charge is that human games are teaching other species to be unpredictable, and unpredictability threatens the stability that the Council has maintained for over 50,000 years." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Elena and Marcus staring at the empty space where Zephyr's image had been. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Marcus finally spoke. 50,000 years of stability," he said quietly. "And they think our games are going to bring it all crashing down." Elena began gathering the necessary files and documentation for the hearing. "Maybe they're right to be worried. Think about it, Marcus. Every game humans play teaches something. Chess teaches strategy and planning. Poker teaches deception and risk assessment. Even simple games like tag teach pursuit and evasion tactics. We've been unconsciously spreading human thinking patterns across the galaxy." The realization hit both of them simultaneously. Human entertainment wasn't just fun and games. It was cultural programming, teaching alien species to adopt human approaches to problem-solving, competition, and social interaction. In a galaxy where most civilizations had remained static for millennia, the introduction of human-style thinking represented a fundamental threat to the established order. Elena spent the next several hours preparing for what might be the most important presentation of her career. She gathered examples of human games from across the spectrum, analyzing their psychological and social impacts. What she found both impressed and worried her. Human games were remarkably sophisticated teaching tools, often more effective at transmitting concepts than formal education. Take the simple game of rock, paper, scissors. On the surface, it appeared to be nothing more than a random decision-making exercise. Deeper analysis revealed lessons in psychology, pattern recognition, and the concept that every strategy has a counter-strategy. Several alien species had adopted variations of the game for conflict resolution, replacing their traditional methods of lengthy deliberation with quick, decisive contests. The wargame Risk had been particularly transformative for the peaceful Silverian Federation. The Silverians had avoided conflict for over 3,000 years, preferring diplomatic solutions to all disputes. After being introduced to Risk, younger Silverians began questioning whether their pacifist approach was truly optimal. Some had even suggested that controlled conflict might be necessary for societal growth and adaptation. Most concerning to the Council was the spread of role-playing games. These complex narrative exercises taught participants to think from multiple perspectives, to adapt their behavior to different situations, and to work together toward common goals while maintaining individual identities. Several species that had been rigidly hierarchical for millennia were beginning to experiment with more flexible social structures after exposure to collaborative storytelling games. Elena realized that defending human games would require more than demonstrating their entertainment value. She would need to prove that the changes they brought to alien societies were beneficial rather than destructive. The challenge was that the Council valued stability above almost everything else. Change, even positive change, was viewed with suspicion. As she prepared her arguments, Elena received a message from an unexpected source. Dr. Kane Meridian, Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council, requested an immediate video conference. Kane had been advocating for human interests on the galactic stage for over a decade, and his political instincts were legendary. "Elena, I've been monitoring the situation," Kane said as his image appeared on her personal communicator. "This ban isn't just about games, it's about fear. The Council has maintained order by keeping species predictable, and human games are making other civilizations unpredictable. They see this as an existential threat." Elena nodded. "I've come to the same conclusion. But how do we argue against 50,000 years of successful governance? The Council's methods have prevented galactic wars and maintained peace across thousands of worlds." Kane's expression grew thoughtful. "Have they, though? Or have they just postponed problems by preventing growth and adaptation?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Think about it, Elena. How many species in this galaxy have actually evolved or improved over the past 50,000 years? How many have developed new technologies, new art forms, new ways of thinking? The Council hasn't maintained peace through wisdom. They've maintained it through stagnation. The insight was profound and troubling. Elena began reviewing historical records, looking for evidence of innovation and progress among Council member species. What she found supported Kane's theory. Most civilizations had remained essentially unchanged for millennia. Their technologies, social structures, and cultural expressions had fossilized under the Council's guidance. "If you're right," Elena said slowly, "then human games aren't corrupting alien societies. They're awakening them." "Exactly," Kane replied. "And that terrifies the Council, because awakened civilizations ask questions. They challenge authority. They want to grow and change and explore new possibilities. Everything the Council has spent 50,000 years trying to prevent." Elena spent the remaining hours before the hearing crafting a defense strategy that she hoped would save not just human games, but the right of all species to evolve and grow. She knew the odds were against her. The Council had already made their decision, and emergency hearings were typically formalities designed to provide the appearance of due process. The journey to Council Chamber 7 took Elena through the heart of Nexus Prime, the massive space station that served as the galactic government's headquarters. The corridors were filled with representatives from hundreds of species, each going about their business with the quiet efficiency that characterized Council operations. Elena noticed something she had never paid attention to before: how similar they all seemed, despite their physical differences. They walked at the same measured pace, spoke in the same moderate tones, and showed the same careful deference to authority. Council Chambers 7 was a vast amphitheater with seating for over 1,000 beings. At the center sat the High Council's tribunal bench, elevated above the crowd and surrounded by holographic displays showing real-time data from across the galaxy. Elena took her designated position at the defendant's podium, feeling very small under the weight of so much scrutiny. The tribunal consisted of 5 beings representing the galaxy's most ancient and respected civilizations. Chairman Vex of the Crystalline Assembly served as the presiding judge. His species had evolved beyond biological form eons ago, existing as conscious geometric patterns that reflected light in mesmerizing ways. To his left sat Matriarch Donna of the Hive Collective, her insectoid features betraying no emotion as she reviewed the charges. The other tribunal members represented equally ancient and influential species, each having contributed to the Council's foundational principles. Dr. Elena Vasquez, Chairman Vex's voice resonated through harmonic crystals embedded in the chamber walls. "You stand accused of overseeing the distribution of harmful cultural material throughout Council space. How do you answer these charges?" Elena took a deep breath, knowing that her next words might determine the future of human participation in galactic civilization. "Honored Chairman, I respectfully dispute the characterization of human games as harmful. While I acknowledge that exposure to human entertainment has resulted in behavioral changes among various species, I contend that these changes represent positive evolution rather than corruption. A ripple of disapproval swept through the chamber. Several representatives made what Elena recognized as expressions of shock or outrage in their respective species' body language. Chairman Vex's crystalline form shifted to a deeper shade of blue, indicating displeasure. "Dr. Vasquez," Matriarch Donna interjected, her mandibles clicking rhythmically. "The stability of our galactic civilization depends upon predictable behavior patterns among member species. The changes induced by human games have already resulted in 3 documented societal disruptions. How can you characterize such destabilization as positive?" Elena activated her holographic display, showing carefully selected examples of the changes human games had brought to various worlds. "Honored Matriarch, I would like to present evidence that these so-called disruptions have actually improved the affected societies. On Nexus Prime, the Vorthan Diplomatic Corps has become more effective negotiators, achieving better outcomes for their people while maintaining peaceful relations with their trading partners. On Kalos, the introduction of strategic thinking has led to a 20% increase in agricultural efficiency without compromising social harmony. On Titan Base, military commanders have reduced casualties in training exercises by 60% through improved tactical decision-making." Quote, "The tribunal members exchanged glances, their various forms of communication creating a susurrus of sound and light throughout the chamber. Elena could sense their uncertainty, but also their resistance to accepting that change might be beneficial." "Dr. Vasquez." A new voice spoke from the tribunal bench. Counselor Reed of the Temporal Observers had remained silent until now, his ancient eyes seeming to perceive dimensions beyond normal space-time. "Your examples focus on short-term improvements. The Council's concern is with long-term stability. How can we be certain that these changes will not eventually lead to conflict, competition, and chaos?" Elena had anticipated this question, and her answer reflected hours of careful preparation. "Honored Counselor, with respect, the absence of conflict does not necessarily indicate the presence of peace. True peace comes from understanding, adaptation, and the ability to resolve differences through creative problem-solving. Human games teach these skills by creating safe environments where beings can explore conflict, competition, and cooperation without real-world consequences." She expanded her holographic display to show psychological analyses of various alien species before and after exposure to human games. These data demonstrate increased empathy, improved communication skills, and enhanced ability to understand different perspectives among game participants. Rather than creating chaos, human games are teaching beings how to manage complexity and uncertainty in constructive ways. Chairman Vex's crystalline form flickered through several color patterns before settling on a neutral amber hue. "Dr. Vasquez, your arguments are intriguing. However, you ask us to abandon 50,000 years of proven governance in favor of an untested approach based on the recreational activities of a species that has existed in galactic society for less than a century. This seems unwise." Elena felt the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. She was asking the galaxy's oldest and most powerful civilizations to reconsider the fundamental principles that had guided them for millennia. The request seemed impossible, even to her. "Honored Chairman," Elena replied, choosing her words carefully, "I am not asking you to abandon your principles. I am asking you to consider that growth and stability are not mutually exclusive. The Council's greatest achievement has been creating a framework where thousands of different species can coexist peacefully. But coexistence is not the same as cooperation, and cooperation is not the same as collaboration." She gestured to the diverse assemblies surrounding them. "Look around this chamber. You have brought together the greatest minds and the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Yet for 50,000 years we have essentially remained unchanged. We have peace, yes, but we also have stagnation. Human games offer a path forward, a way to maintain harmony while allowing for growth, innovation, and evolution." The chamber fell silent as Elena's words hung in the air. She could feel the tension radiating from hundreds of beings, each contemplating the implications of what she had said. The silence stretched for nearly a full minute before Matriarch Donna spoke again. "Dr. Vasquez, Your words suggest that the Council's methods are insufficient. Do you truly believe that 50,000 years of peace and stability represent failure? Elena realized she had reached the crucial moment of her defense. Everything depended on how she answered this question. Honored Matriarch, I believe that 50,000 years of peace and stability represent a magnificent achievement that should be celebrated and preserved. But I also believe that true success lies not in maintaining the status quo, but in building upon it to create something even better. She paused, gathering her courage for what she knew would be either her strongest argument or the statement that doomed her case. The Council has given the galaxy something precious, proof that different species can live together without destroying each other. Human games offer the next step in that evolution, proof that different species can grow together while making each other stronger. The tribunal members began what Elena recognized as formal deliberation, their various forms of communication creating a complex symphony of light, sound, and energy that excluded all other beings in the chamber. The process continued for over an hour, during which Elena stood at the defendant's podium, acutely aware that the future of human participation in galactic civilization hung in the balance. When the deliberation ended, Chairman Vex addressed the assembly with a voice that carried the weight of eons. Dr. Vasquez, the tribunal has considered your arguments and found them thought-provoking. However, we remain unconvinced that the risks associated with human games are justified by their potential benefits. Elena felt her heart sink, but Chairman Vex continued speaking. Therefore, we propose a compromise. The ban on human games will remain in effect throughout Council space, with one exception. You will be permitted to demonstrate the value of human games by engaging members of this tribunal in a single gaming session. If you can prove that human games enhance rather than corrupt alien thinking, we will reconsider our position. The proposal caught Elena completely off guard. She had prepared for outright rejection or grudging acceptance, but not for this. The tribunal was offering her a chance to prove her point through direct demonstration, but the stakes could not be higher. If the session went poorly, it would provide definitive proof that human games were dangerous. If it went well, it might save not just human entertainment, but open new possibilities for galactic civilization. Honored Chairman, Elena replied, I accept your proposal. What type of game would the tribunal prefer to experience? The crystalline being's form shifted through several colors before settling on a deep purple that Elena interpreted as contemplation. Dr. Vasquez, we leave that choice to you. Select the game that best represents what human entertainment has to offer. But understand that this will be your only opportunity. The future of human games throughout the galaxy will be determined by what happens in the next few hours. Elena felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. She had studied thousands of human games during her preparation, analyzing their psychological impacts and cultural significance. Now she had to choose just one that would represent the entirety of human recreational culture to beings who had existed for millions of years. As she considered her options, Elena realized that the choice itself revealed something important about human nature. Humans created games not just for entertainment, but as tools for learning, growing, and connecting with others. Every human game, from the simplest children's activity to the most complex strategic simulation, served multiple purposes simultaneously. The question was not which game would be most impressive to ancient alien minds, but which game would best demonstrate the unique value that human thinking could bring to galactic civilization. Elena smiled as the answer became clear to her. She knew exactly which game to choose and why it would either save or doom humanity's place among the stars. Honored Tribunal, Elena announced, I would like to introduce you to a game that humans call diplomacy. It is a game about negotiation, alliance building, and strategic thinking, but most importantly, it is a game about understanding that sometimes the best way to win is to help others succeed. The tribunal members exchanged glances once again, their various forms of communication creating ripples of uncertainty throughout the chamber. Elena could sense their skepticism, but also their curiosity. They had never encountered a human game designed specifically around the concepts that formed the foundation of galactic civilization. As Elena began explaining the rules of diplomacy, she realized that this was not just a demonstration of human games. It was a test of whether two fundamentally different approaches to civilization could find common ground. The Council valued stability and predictability above all else. Humans valued growth and adaptation, even when they led to uncertainty. The next few hours would determine whether these two philosophies could coexist, or whether humanity would be forced to choose between their nature and their place in galactic society. Elena began setting up the game board, knowing that the future of both human and alien civilizations might depend on how well she could teach ancient beings to think like humans, even if only for a single game. The chamber had grown quiet, as representatives from hundreds of worlds watched Elena prepare the game materials. Many of them had never seen human games in action, having only heard reports about their effects on other species. Now they would witness firsthand the cultural phenomenon that had prompted the Council's unprecedented ban. Elena looked up at the tribunal members, each representing millions of years of evolutionary development and thousands of years of galactic governance experience. In a few moments, she would ask them to step outside their ancient comfort zones and experience the universe through human eyes. The game was about to begin, and with it, the most important cultural exchange in human history. Elena took a deep breath and prepared to roll the dice, quite literally, on humanity's future among the stars. Elena spread the game board across the tribunal's elevated platform, the familiar map of Europe taking shape under the chamber's ambient lighting. The sight of Earth's ancient continent seemed almost absurd in this setting, surrounded by beings whose civilizations predated human written history by millions of years. Yet as she placed the colored armies representing different nations, Elena felt a strange confidence building within her. Chairman Vex's crystalline form shifted to a curious shade of green as he examined the board. Dr. Vasquez, this appears to be a representation of territorial control. Are human games focused on conquest and domination? Not conquest, honored Chairman, Elena replied, carefully positioning the final game pieces. This game teaches something far more sophisticated. It demonstrates that true power comes not from dominating others, but from understanding their motivations and finding ways to achieve mutual benefit. Matriarch Donna's compound eyes studied the board with obvious skepticism. You ask us to participate in a simulation of warfare. This seems contrary to the peaceful principles the Council has maintained. Elena had anticipated this reaction. Honored Matriarch, this game contains no random elements, no dice to roll, no cards to draw. Every outcome depends entirely on communication, negotiation, and strategic thinking. The warfare is merely a framework for exploring these deeper concepts. Counselor Reed leaned forward, his ancient features showing the first hint of genuine interest Elena had seen during the hearing. Explain the victory conditions, Drive, Vasquez. How does one win this game? A player wins by controlling 18 supply centers across the map, Elena explained, indicating the marked cities and territories. However, and this is crucial, it is virtually impossible to achieve victory through force alone. Success requires forming alliances, making agreements, and sometimes sacrificing short-term advantages for long-term positioning. She gestured to the 7 different colored army sets. Each player represents a major European power from Earth's early 20th century. Each nation has different geographical advantages and challenges. The Austrian player controls the center of the map, but is surrounded by potential enemies. The English player has naval superiority, but limited land forces. The Russian player commands vast territories, but faces threats on multiple fronts. The 4th tribunal member, Sage Autumn of the Verdant Collective, had remained silent throughout the hearing. Her tree-like form rustled softly as she considered the game setup. Dr. Vasquez, you describe a scenario where conflict is inevitable, yet cooperation is essential. This seems paradoxical. That paradox is exactly what makes the game valuable as a learning tool, Elena replied. Players must navigate the tension between competition and collaboration. They must build trust while remaining prepared for betrayal. They must communicate honestly while concealing their true intentions when necessary. The 5th tribunal member, Prime Operator Delta of the Synthetic Consortium, processed this information with mechanical precision. His robotic form incorporated elements from dozens of different technological traditions, representing the collective knowledge of artificial intelligences throughout the galaxy. Dr. Vasquez, optimal strategy in such scenarios would involve mathematical analysis of all possible outcomes. Why would emotional beings engage in such inefficient decision-making processes? Elena smiled at the question, recognizing it as an opportunity to demonstrate one of humanity's most distinctive traits. Prime Operator, That's precisely the point. Pure mathematical analysis fails in this game because it doesn't account for the unpredictable nature of personality, psychology, and creative thinking. The most successful players are those who understand not just the mechanics of the game, but the minds of their opponents. She began assigning nations to each tribunal member, explaining the unique characteristics and strategic options available to each power. Chairman Vex received Austria-Hungary, positioned at the center of the action with multiple neighbors and complex diplomatic challenges. Matriarch Donna took control of Germany, the game's most industrially powerful nation but one surrounded by potential enemies. Councillor Reed assumed the role of England, isolated by water but possessing the strongest navy. Sage Autumn controlled Russia, vast and potentially powerful but vulnerable to coordinated attacks. Prime Operator Delta received France, a nation balanced between offensive and defensive capabilities. Elena herself would play as Italy, a position that required careful timing and diplomatic finesse to succeed. The final nation, Turkey, would be controlled by the Chamber's advanced AI system, providing a neutral seventh player that would respond predictably to the actions of the others. The game begins in the spring of 1901, Elena explained, distributing the order sheets that players would use to submit their moves simultaneously. Each turn represents one season, and players have precisely 15 minutes to negotiate, plan, and submit their orders. All moves are revealed simultaneously, which means trust and communication are essential for successful coordination. As the first negotiation phase began, Elena watched the tribunal members with fascination. These beings had spent millennia perfecting the art of formal diplomacy within the council's structured environment. Now they were being asked to engage in the fluid, unpredictable world of human-style bargaining and alliance building. Chairman Vex approached Matriarch Donna with the measured precision that characterized all his communications. Honored colleague, our nations share a border that could become contentious. Perhaps we might discuss arrangements for mutual non-aggression? Matriarch Donna's mandibles clicked thoughtfully as she considered the proposal. Chairman, I appreciate your diplomatic approach. However, I must also consider my nation's relationship with Councillor Reed's England. A three-way alliance might prove more stable than bilateral agreements. Elena observed this exchange with growing excitement. The tribunal members were already beginning to think beyond the immediate mechanics of the game, considering complex multi-party relationships and long-term strategic implications. This was exactly what she had hoped to demonstrate. Meanwhile, Sage Autumn had approached Prime Operator Delta with a proposal that surprised everyone in the chamber. Prime Operator, my analysis of the board position suggests that our nations would benefit from coordinated action against the Central Powers. Are you amenable to discussing a joint strategy? The artificial being processed this suggestion with visible concentration, his optical sensors flickering as he analyzed thousands of possible scenarios. Sage Autumn, your proposal has merit from a mathematical perspective. However, I calculate significant risk in trusting biological entities to maintain agreements over multiple turns. Elena realized that Prime Operator Delta was struggling with one of the game's most important lessons: the necessity of accepting uncertainty and risk in order to achieve meaningful cooperation. His artificial intelligence was perfectly suited for calculating optimal outcomes in deterministic systems, but the human element of unpredictability was forcing him to operate outside his comfort zone. Prime Operator, Elena interjected gently, that's exactly the challenge this game is designed to address. In the real galaxy, you regularly work with biological entities whose behavior cannot be perfectly predicted. This game provides a safe environment to practice managing that uncertainty. As the negotiation period continued, Elena noticed something remarkable happening. The tribunal members were beginning to adopt distinctly human approaches to communication and problem-solving. Councillor Reed had started using subtle implications rather than direct statements, allowing his negotiating partners to read between the lines. Matriarch Donna had discovered the power of asking questions that revealed information while appearing to offer it. Even Chairman Vex was experimenting with strategic ambiguity, making statements that could be interpreted in multiple ways. The first turn's orders were submitted, and Elena revealed the results simultaneously. Most movements were conservative, with players testing their neighbors' intentions rather than making aggressive moves. However, the pattern of alliances was already becoming clear. An informal partnership was developing between England, France, and Russia, while Germany and Austria-Hungary were exploring closer cooperation. Interesting, observed Counselor Reed as he studied the revealed moves. Prime Operator Delta, your decision to support my fleet's movement was unexpected but appreciated. Sage Autumn, I see that you chose to honor our discussion about coordinated action. Prime Operator Delta's optical array flickered with what Elena recognized as the artificial equivalent of satisfaction. Counselor Reed, I have concluded that calculated trust yields superior outcomes to pure self-interest in this scenario. Your reliability in the previous negotiation has increased my confidence in future cooperation. Elena felt a surge of triumph as she watched this exchange. The game was already teaching the tribunal members to value trust and cooperation over rigid adherence to optimal individual strategies. They were learning to see other players not as obstacles to overcome but as potential partners whose success could contribute to their own. The second turn brought more complex negotiations as players began to understand the deeper strategic implications of their positions. Matriarch Donna approached Elena with a proposal that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of the game's psychological elements. Dr. Vasquez, your position as Italy requires careful timing and diplomatic skill. I propose an alliance that would allow you to expand into the Mediterranean while I focus on northern objectives. However, such an agreement would require mutual trust over several turns. Elena was impressed by the proposal's sophistication. Matriarch Donna had recognized that short-term gains meant little without long-term strategic positioning, and she was willing to invest in relationship building for future benefit. Honored Matriarch, your proposal interests me. However, I would need assurance that our agreement would not conflict with your arrangements with Chairman Vex. Ah, Matriarch Donna replied, her mandibles clicking in what Elena had learned to recognize as amusement. You raise an important point about managing multiple relationships simultaneously. This is indeed more complex than traditional council negotiations. As the turns progressed, Elena watched the tribunal members develop increasingly sophisticated approaches to the game's challenges. They began forming temporary alliances based on immediate circumstances while maintaining flexibility for future opportunities. They learned to communicate through actions as well as words, using their military movements to signal intentions and build trust. Most importantly, they discovered the power of creative problem-solving that benefited multiple parties simultaneously. The turning point came during the fourth turn, when a crisis developed that threatened to destroy the careful balance of power that had emerged. Chairman Vex found himself under attack from multiple directions, his central position becoming a liability rather than an advantage. According to traditional game theory, the other players should have pressed their advantage and eliminated Austria-Hungary from contention. Instead, something unprecedented happened. Counselor Reed proposed a temporary ceasefire that would allow all players to reassess their positions and explore alternative strategies. Colleagues, he announced to the chamber, I believe we have an opportunity to demonstrate that competition need not result in elimination. Perhaps we can find a solution that allows all parties to continue meaningfully participating. Elena felt her heart racing as she watched the tribunal members seriously consider this proposal. They were voluntarily choosing cooperation over dominance, even when dominance was clearly achievable. This was exactly the kind of thinking that human games could teach, but she had never expected to see it emerge so quickly among beings with such different psychological foundations. Prime Operator Delta was the first to support the proposal, his artificial intelligence having calculated that long-term stability was more valuable than short-term advantage. Counselor Reed's suggestion has merit. Eliminating Chairman Vex would create a power vacuum that could destabilize the entire board position. Sage Autumn and Matriarch Donna quickly added their support, recognizing that the precedent of mercy and strategic restraint could benefit all players in future situations. Even Chairman Vex, despite being the beneficiary of this unexpected cooperation, seemed genuinely moved by his colleagues' willingness to prioritize collective stability over individual gain. The game continued for several more turns, with the tribunal members exploring increasingly sophisticated concepts of alliance management, strategic communication, and creative problem-solving. They learned to read between the lines of diplomatic communications, to build trust through consistent actions over time, and to find win-win solutions to seemingly zero-sum conflicts. As the session drew to a close, Elena realized that something fundamental had changed in the chamber. The tribunal members were no longer communicating with the formal, measured tones that had characterized the hearing's beginning. They were engaged in dynamic, creative conversations that incorporated humor, speculation, and genuine emotional investment in the outcomes. Dr. Vasquez, Chairman Vex announced as they concluded the final turn, "I must admit that this experience has been illuminating. The game forced us to confront challenges that we rarely encounter in traditional council proceedings." Matriarch Donna's compound eyes reflected what Elena interpreted as newfound respect. The psychological complexity was unexpected. We were required to understand not just what our colleagues were doing, but why they were doing it and how they might respond to different approaches. Councillor Reed nodded slowly, his ancient features showing signs of deep contemplation. Most intriguing was the discovery that apparent conflicts often concealed opportunities for mutual benefit. The game taught us to look beyond surface disagreements to find underlying common interests. Prime Operator Delta's optical array had been cycling through different colors as he processed the experience. "Dr. Vasquez, my algorithms have been permanently modified by this encounter. The integration of emotional and logical decision-making processes has revealed computational possibilities I had not previously considered." Sage Autumn rustled softly as she spoke. The game demonstrated that adaptation and growth are possible even within structured competitive environments. This insight has implications that extend far beyond entertainment. Elena felt a profound sense of accomplishment as she listened to these reflections. The tribunal members had not just played a human game. They had experienced a fundamental shift in their understanding of competition, cooperation, and creative problem-solving. They had learned to think like humans while remaining true to their own natures. "Honored Tribunal," Elena said, addressing the 5 beings who would determine the future of human games throughout the galaxy, "you have experienced firsthand what human entertainment has to offer. Our games are not designed to corrupt or destabilize. They are designed to teach, to challenge, and to help beings discover new ways of understanding themselves and others." The chamber fell silent as the tribunal members engaged in their formal deliberation process once again. This time, however, Elena could sense a different quality to their communications. The rigid, hierarchical exchange of the earlier session had been replaced by something more dynamic and collaborative. When Chairman Vex finally addressed the assembly, his crystalline form had shifted to a warm golden hue that Elena had never seen before. "Dr. Vasquez, the tribunal has reached a unanimous decision. The ban on human games is hereby lifted, effective immediately." A wave of excitement swept through the chamber as representatives from hundreds of worlds realized the implications of this announcement. Elena felt tears of relief beginning to form in her eyes, but Chairman Vex was not finished speaking. "Furthermore," he continued, "the Council hereby establishes the Interspecies Cultural Exchange Initiative, with human games serving as the foundational curriculum. We have learned today that diversity of thought is not a threat to stability, but rather its strongest foundation." Elena could hardly believe what she was hearing. Not only had human games been vindicated, but they were being embraced as a tool for improving galactic civilization itself. Matriarch Donna rose from her position at the tribunal bench. "Dr. Vasquez, the Hive Collective would like to request immediate access to human gaming materials for integration into our educational systems. We believe our youth would benefit greatly from exposure to these alternative thinking processes." Similar requests began flowing in from representatives throughout the chamber. The Crystalline Assembly wanted to explore how games might enhance their collective decision-making processes. The Synthetic Consortium was interested in using games to improve artificial intelligence development. The Verdant Collective saw potential applications for ecosystem management and environmental planning. Elena realized that this moment represented more than just the vindication of human entertainment. It marked the beginning of a new era in galactic civilization, one where diversity of thought would be celebrated rather than feared, where different species would learn from each other rather than simply coexisting in isolation. As she packed up the diplomacy board, Elena reflected on the profound irony of the situation. A game about European political intrigue from Earth's early 20th century had become the catalyst for revolutionary change in a galaxy-spanning civilization millions of years old. The human capacity for finding lessons in play, for learning through entertainment, had proven its value on the largest possible stage. The chamber began to empty as representatives hurried to communicate the tribunal's decision to their home worlds. Elena could already imagine the excitement that would spread across human colonies throughout the galaxy as word of the victory reached them. Game designers, entertainers, and cultural ambassadors would find themselves in unprecedented demand as alien civilizations rushed to explore the possibilities that human games offered. But perhaps most importantly, Elena knew that this was just the beginning. Human games had opened the door to cultural exchange and mutual learning on a scale never before imagined. The rigid boundaries between species that had defined galactic civilization for 50,000 years were beginning to dissolve, replaced by something more flexible, more creative, and infinitely more promising. As Elena walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime, she noticed changes already beginning to manifest. Alien beings who had previously maintained careful formal distance were engaged in animated conversations about strategy, psychology, and creative problem-solving. The sterile efficiency of council operations was giving way to something more dynamic and unpredictable. Elena smiled as she realized that humanity had given the galaxy something it hadn't even known it was missing: the freedom to grow, to change, and to become something greater than the sum of its parts. The age of human games had begun, and with it a new chapter in the story of galactic civilization itself. 6 months after the Tribunal's historic decision, the galaxy had transformed in ways no one could have predicted. Elena stood in her new office aboard the Cultural Exchange Station, watching through the massive viewport as ships from dozens of worlds arrived for the first intergalactic gaming championship. The sight still amazed her: massive crystalline assembly vessels docking alongside sleek Hive Collective cruisers, while smaller craft from newly contacted civilizations weaved between them like excited children. The championship had been Counselor Reed's idea, born from his continued fascination with human strategic thinking. What had started as a simple suggestion during a council session had evolved into the largest peaceful gathering in galactic history. Over 300 species were participating, each bringing their own interpretations and variations of human games. Dr. Marcus Chen materialized beside her via hologram, his excitement evident, despite the digital distortion. "Elena, you need to see what's happening in Sector 7. The Quantum Collective just unveiled their version of chess that exists in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Players have to think in quantum superposition states." Elena laughed, remembering how overwhelming a simple game of diplomacy had seemed to the Tribunal just months ago. "How many species are adapting the games now?" "Last count was over 800, Marcus replied, consulting his datapad. "The temporal observers created a version of poker where players can bet on past and future events. The Machine Intelligence Network developed cooperative puzzle games that require organic and artificial minds to work together. It's unprecedented." The communication array chimed with an incoming priority message from Ambassador Kane. His image appeared alongside Marcus's hologram, both men grinning with barely contained enthusiasm. "Elena, we've just received formal requests from the Outer Rim territories," Kane announced. 17 previously isolated civilizations want to join the Council specifically to participate in cultural gaming exchanges. The Department of Xenoarchaeology is reporting contact with ancient civilizations that had been dormant for millennia. They're awakening because they detected the quantum signatures of advanced gameplay across the galaxy. Elena felt a chill of wonder run down her spine. Human games weren't just spreading among known civilizations. They were literally awakening sleeping cultures and drawing hidden societies into the galactic community. The implications were staggering. "There's more," Kane continued. "The Preservation Archives have been analyzing the social changes, and the results are remarkable. Interspecies cooperation is up 400%. Trade agreements are being negotiated faster than ever because species understand each other's psychological patterns better. Even the warrior clans of Sigma Draconis have replaced ritual combat with competitive gaming tournaments." Elena moved to her central display, activating the real-time Galactic Civilization Monitor. The screen showed a living map of cultural activity across thousands of worlds. Where once there had been isolated pockets of static civilization, now there were flowing networks of communication, trade, and exchange. The rigid boundaries between species were dissolving into something organic and dynamic. "Look at this," Elena said, highlighting a particular sector. "The Verdant Collective has been teaching strategy games to their symbiotic plant networks. They're developing collective intelligence capabilities that are revolutionizing their agricultural output. Meanwhile, the hive mind species are using role-playing games to explore individual identity concepts they've never experienced before." Marcus's hologram flickered as he accessed new data streams. Elena, we're detecting something even more significant. The games are triggering evolutionary accelerations. Species that have remained unchanged for millions of years are developing new cognitive capabilities within single generations. The Council's xenobiologists are calling it, quote, directed cultural evolution. Elena's communication array activated again, this time showing the face of Chairman Vex. His crystalline form had developed new patterns of light that hadn't existed before his exposure to human games. The tribunal had discovered that their thought processes could become more complex and nuanced through competitive play. Dr. Vasquez, Chairman Vex said, the Council has reached another unanimous decision. We are establishing permanent cultural innovation centers throughout the galaxy, each one dedicated to developing new forms of interactive learning. Humanity will serve as the primary consultants for this initiative. Elena felt overwhelmed by the scope of what was happening. What had begun as a desperate defense of human entertainment had become the foundation for a galactic renaissance. Chairman Vex, what about the concerns regarding stability and predictability? The crystalline being's form shifted through colors Elena had learned to associate with deep contemplation. Dr. Vasquez, we have discovered that true stability comes not from preventing change, but from managing it wisely. The galaxy is stronger now because its component civilizations are more adaptable, more creative, and more capable of solving unexpected problems. As if to demonstrate his point, an emergency alert flashed across Elena's displays. A natural disaster was unfolding in the Centauri system, where solar flares were threatening to sterilize 3 inhabited worlds. In the old galaxy, such a crisis would have required months of council deliberation and formal disaster response protocols. Instead, Elena watched in amazement as dozens of species spontaneously organized rescue operations using strategies they had learned from human games. The crystalline assembly used tactical positioning concepts from chess to optimize evacuation routes. The Hive Collective employed resource management skills from economic simulation games to coordinate relief supplies. The Synthetic Consortium applied collaborative problem-solving techniques from cooperative board games to integrate their efforts with organic rescue teams. Within hours, the crisis had been resolved with an efficiency and creativity that would have been impossible under the old system. More importantly, the rescue operation had fostered new partnerships between species that had never worked together before. Elena, Marcus said, his voice filled with wonder, do you realize what we've done? We haven't just saved human games, we've accidentally triggered the next phase of galactic evolution. Elena nodded, watching as the emergency response teams celebrated their success across multiple star systems. The Council was right to be afraid of change, she said quietly. But they were wrong about what kind of change our games would bring. Instead of chaos and conflict, we've given them adaptation and cooperation. Her display chimed with another incoming message, this one from an unexpected source. The transmission originated from the galaxy's edge, from regions that had been considered empty space for millennia. The signal was weak, but unmistakably artificial. Unknown transmission source, Elena announced to the station. This is Dr. Elena Vasquez of the Cultural Exchange Initiative. Please identify yourself. The response that came back made her heart skip a beat. Dr. Vasquez, this is Navigator Prime of the Wanderer Fleet. We are representatives of civilizations that fled Council space millions of years ago to escape forced preservation. We have been monitoring the cultural changes in the galaxy and request permission to return home. Elena looked at Marcus and Kane, seeing her own amazement reflected in their faces. The games hadn't just changed existing civilizations. They had created conditions that allowed exiled cultures to return from the deep void between galaxies. Navigator Prime, Elena replied. You are welcome in Council space. How many ships comprise your fleet? Dr. Vasquez, we represent 47 separate Exodus civilizations and approximately 12 billion individuals who have been living in interstellar space for eons. We carry technologies and knowledge that could benefit all galactic civilization, but we had to wait until the galaxy was ready to accept diversity rather than suppress it. Elena felt tears forming in her eyes as the full magnitude of what was happening became clear. The simple act of defending human games had triggered a cascade of changes that was literally reshaping galactic civilization. Species were evolving. Ancient exiles were returning. and new forms of cooperation were emerging that had been impossible under the old rigid system. Chairman Vex appeared on her display again, his crystalline form now incorporating patterns that seemed to dance with joy. Dr. Vasquez, the Council has voted to declare this the beginning of the Second Galactic Age. Humanity will be honored as the catalyst species that made this transformation possible. Elena looked out at the viewport again, watching as ships from the Wanderer fleet began emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system. They were ancient vessels, scarred by millions of years in the void, but they carried with them the hopes and dreams of civilizations that had refused to surrender their freedom. "Marcus Kane," Elena said, "prepare the welcome protocols. It looks like our gaming championship is about to become the largest cultural reunion in galactic history." As the celebration began across hundreds of worlds, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. A simple game of diplomacy had taught the galaxy's oldest civilizations that diversity was strength, that cooperation was more powerful than control, and that the freedom to grow and change was worth any risk. The galaxy had learned to play, and in learning to play, it had learned to live. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.